to the United States. And based in Washington, si Ambassador Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez. Ambassador, good morning po, si Peter at Rica dito sa DZMM.
Hi, good morning, Peter. Good morning, Rica.
Good morning, Ambassador. Thank you po for joining us. Iba yung background
Sure.
ni Ambassador niyan, ha?
It's good to see you back, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador
Well, thank
Babe.
you.
Opo. Let's start po if we may dun sa ano po ang overall mood sa Washington ngayon in the midst of what's happening in Iran and the Middle East, including Lebanon.
Well, obviously, everybody's watching what's going to happen and what's happening right now in the Middle East, and of course, the major concern for most countries is how long this is going to be and how long it will take for this conflict to end. No, for us, of course, we have two major concerns. Number one is the economic impact that it will have with us because of the oil prices, and secondly, obviously, another big concern for us is our OFWs who are in the Middle East.
Opo.
These are major concerns for countries like ours.
More to the point, Mr. Ambassador, meron na pong mga atake no sa ilang US embassies and consulates po. Kumusta po yung mga trabahador natin, yung ating mga kababayan na doon nagtatrabaho sa US embassies or consulates? I mean, has there been any report na may nasaktan or anything like that?
Well, so far wala pa naman, pero obviously we're watching that also. Our embassies in those areas are also in touch with many of those that are working in the U.S. embassies. But more importantly is that many of those that are no longer needed, at least during this conflict, are already being planned on being brought out of the country.
How will they be able to do that, Ambassador, if...
But I suppose this is going to be a U.S. military operation. They're going to do something like that, yes.
Opo. Pero pag ganito po, Ambassador, no, hindi naman sila mawawala ng work. Ito transfer back lang sila sa US.
Well, I assume that that's the case because this is obviously a force majeure. It's not, nobody's, responsible, personally for this, whatever is happening right now.
Okay. In the course of this so-called attack, or war, could depende kung how one sees it, po. Is the United States still being helped by its allies, particularly NATO?
Well, I think from the latest reports, there has been no. Let's put it this way, since this was purely a Israeli U.S. operation, and NATO is assumed not to have been included in the plan, and so none of them have had any indication that they plan to get into the situation. No, I think France has made it very clear that they will have to wait and see what happens in the Middle East if this thing spreads out as it looks like it is right now.
Thank you, Ambassador. More locally, no? Meron pong mga nagsasabi ngayon, may mga reports na madaming mga barko ng China na namataan dito po sa paligid ng Pilipinas. Ano po, their usual haunts, sabi nga nila. Ang tanong, hindi kaya makaapekto sa atin, tumapang ang China na gumawa ng hindi maganda dahil nakalubog ang US o nakatuon ang pansin ng US ngayon sa nangyayari sa Iran at Middle East?
Well, sa tingin natin, hindi naman siguro ganun ang sitwasyon ngayon. But of course, as in any conflict and anywhere around the world, it can always spread out. Yan ang ating dinadasal na hindi mangyari sa mundo, no? Dahil with what's happening already in Europe with Ukraine, nandiyan pa rin yung Ukraine war.
Opo.
Ngayon dito sa Middle East, nag-i-spread ito dahil obviously the missiles are going all over countries that like even Lebanon, as far as Oman and other countries that have supposedly U.S. personnel. So we don't know. We don't really know, but let's put it this way. We're still so far away from this conflict I hope it remains to be isolated in that area, but God willing, we will be protected from that.
Trump is singing a different tune ngayon, Ambassador, no, na mukhang as long as kailangan nilang gawin ito hanggang mapacify yung Iran, tuloy-tuloy ang pag-atake ng US at ng Israel. But kanina din po na-mention na ninyo, economically, tinitingnan natin how this will affect us. Is the US also thinking of their allies pagdating po dun sa magiging economic repercussions nitong ginagawa nilang pag-atake?
Well, sa ngayon, of course, they're concentrated on this conflict, no? Hindi pa tumitingin sila sa mga ganyan. Pero as far as we're concerned, lahat ng mga bayan naman, they all have to have their own plans on how to handle the situation, especially on the economic front. I think President Marcos already was very clear that we have to start really looking at ways and means to be able to bring down the impact by cutting down on the excise tax on fuel. That's probably one step. And the other thing is, of course, to ask everybody to start really being a little more frugal in the use of fuel. Perhaps, if going around unnecessarily and maybe going on carpools, yung mga ganyan, matagal nang pinaplano yan. Those are things that we have to start thinking about right now kasi talagang seryoso to. If there is a big increase in fuel or fuel is going to be scarce, that's going to affect the economy of the world. And again, let's hope that this conflict is immediately resolved because a prolonged one would mean a global recession.
Opo. Ambassador, let's talk about history in terms of oil crisis. Noong pong 2022, noong in-invade ng Russia ang Ukraine, ang Brent crude po ay sumipa ng $120 per barrel. Do you think yung nangyayari po ngayon is worse than what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine in terms of petroleum prices?
Well, I would think that this probably would be worse because the Middle East is a major supplier of oil all over the world. And obviously the economy of the world, aside from the fact that they are a major source of oil, they are also now a financial hub. As we all know, the Qatar and Kuwait and many of these parts of this Middle East have become financial hubs. This is very important for the global economy. So again, it's very important that this conflict is resolved quickly because a prolonged one would only mean higher prices and more difficulty for the economy to be sustained.
According to President Trump, Mr. Ambassador, sabi niya, the U.S. is ready to escort ships across the Strait of Hormuz. Is that something that's realistic and doable, you think?
Well, the United States has a lot of resources. Obviously, they're able to do many things that other countries cannot. And they also have the high technology kind of equipment and kind of weapons that they have, as is seen by what happened not only in Iran, but also in Venezuela. So we don't know what kind of weaponry or what kind of what you call this hardware that they can use to be able to protect ships from crossing the Hormuz. But as I said, you have a country here like Iran that also they have been preparing. We were assuming that they've been preparing for this, and that's the reason why, no matter how much areas they've already been able to neutralize, meaning the U.S. and Israel, there's still the supply of missiles are still quite all over the area, no? So this is a major concern for everyone, of course.
Opo, dun din po sa topic ng Strait of Hormuz, Ambassador, is the US also looking at ways para ma-control yung possible na paghaharang ng Iran doon nga po sa pag-flow ng mga tankers going everywhere to different countries?
Well, definitely they are. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is a major thoroughfare for the shipment of oil, no? So it is something that the United States will have to really look into. And, well, I think the NATO countries at some point in time will have to look and see whether there'll be because they too will be affected by what's happening right now in the Middle East. So I don't know if there's any conversation that's going on already at this point between the NATO countries and the United States, but I assume that it will have to come to fore at some point.
Okay. Para po dun sa mga kinakabahan dahil binomba na nga no, inatake ng drones and missiles yung mga kapit bansa ng Iran kagaya ng Qatar, Bahrain, etc. Ano po? Dahil may mga US bases doon. Realistic po bang sabihin na maaari ding atakehin ng Iran ang mga EDCA sites dito sa Pilipinas?
Well, and I think that's a little bit far-fetched dahil the EDCA sites have really no bearing whatsoever with what's happening in the Middle East. While they have access to these bases, the U.S., but it is all for our own defense. That's been very clear from the very beginning. Lahat itong mga EDCA sites natin, all 9 of them, are geared towards protecting the Philippines from any potential conflict. Protecting our territorial integrity in connivance with our ally, the United States. But as I said, in any kind of conflict, there will always be two sides, and we are at this point in time we're on the side of not necessarily in the United States, but on the side of what we feel is the right side, which means to say, people like-minded countries who believe that our territorial sovereignty is very important, and that the South China Sea is free and clear of any foreign dominance.
How is paano po ang naging pagtanggap ng mga Americans dito sa ginawa ni Trump? Because when this happened last weekend po, no, I've been reading editorials and ng mga US broadsheets na hindi nila nagustuhan yung sudden decision ni Trump without even consulting the Congress dito sa ginawa po niya. But right now po ba, nagbabago din po ba yung pananaw ng mga Americans on this?
Well, generally, I think the Americans have accepted this as something that perhaps is forthcoming. But this is obviously an internal situation for the United States. Whether this particular situation was important for the security of the United States, which is what President Trump has claimed, and so this will have to be threshed out at some point in time. And I guess, as they say, history will be the judge whether this was the right move or not.
Mr. Ambassador, last na lang po mula sa akin. Ngayon, ang kinakabahan ng mga Pilipino dito po sa ating bansa, yung pagsipa ng presyo ng petrolyo. Dahil ayon sa latest estimates, yung paggalaw pa lang ng Dubai crude and Brent crude, it can translate if it were to be decided today, mga plus 10 pesos na po per liter ang itataas pa bukod dun sa nangyari na kahapon na Martes. Ang tanong po, Mr. Ambassador, is if push comes to shove, meron kayang posibilidad na tulungan tayo, bentahan tayo ng United States ng oil dahil self-sufficient po ang di po ba, ang US. Tapos meron pa silang kinukuha ngayon na oil mula sa Venezuela. Is that even a remote possibility?
Well, of course, that's something that we can work on. In fact, as a matter of fact, it's something that I have already mentioned to some of our economic managers. I think I mentioned it to Secretary Ralph Recto, the new executive secretary, that if there is any emergency, I think that we could start looking at other countries, most specifically the United States, and see whether we can get the supply of our oil from these countries that have already producing it in mass quantity. No, so there's always that possibility, and I think that the United States will be open to that type of situation for us to be able to have access to some of this oil, especially those that are, as you said, from Venezuela. If there's enough oil coming from Venezuela, since the United States now has major control of the Venezuelan oil situation, we can very well tap into that one. Always possible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And finally po, can you please assure yung ating mga kamag-anak ng mga personnel na nagtatrabaho sa mga US bases and consulates? If you have any message, Mr. Ambassador, please go ahead.
Well, I just want to assure especially our Filipino citizens who are working not only in the U.S. Embassy in these areas, but in other areas as well in the Middle East, that the government would do everything to protect them in any way, and if they have to be evacuated. Now, those working at the U.S. Embassy, I'm quite certain that, in fact, we've talked to a state government official, State Department official, that. All personnel of the U.S. Embassy will obviously be given as much protection as they possible, and that at some point in time they will be evacuated to a safe area.
Mr. Ambassador, we thank you so much po as always for your time at muli po mag-usap po tayo on some other matters, hopefully not about the war.
Well,
Salamat po.
Okay, salamat rin.
Thank
Thank
you,
Peter.
Mr.
Thank
Ambassador.
you.
Ingat po.
Salamat. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. His Excellency Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez, Philippine Ambassador to the USA. Ang oras, it's 9:40.